Hey guys, we are back again, and in this video we are going to solve financial instrument problems for CFNL FR. And this chapter is like a very tricky and very lengthy, so I'm not going to discuss all the topics here. We are going to solve only the problems which are relevant for examination, which will get us the number that we require. Okay, so our focus is to solve the illustrations from Institute study material. All the questions, yes, while solving the questions we will be discussing the concept, but not it is other way around. Yeah, let's start. I'll read the question. Illustration 1. A company borrowed 50 lakh rupees at the rate of 12% per annum. Tenure of the loan is 10 years. Interest is payable at every year and the principal is repayable at the end of the 10th year. So there is one guy who is taking a loan and the tenure is 10 years. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm taking a loan from a bank and I said that I will pay interest at the end of each year at the rate of 12% per annum on 50 lakh rupees, and at the end of the 10th year I will be repaying the principal amount. So that is my condition or a contract with the bank. The company defaulted in the payment of interest for the year 4, 5, 6. So I made the payment for 1, 2, 3. But I defaulted for 4, 5, 6. A loan rescheduling agreement took place at the end of 7th year. So here my loan is getting rescheduling. As per the agreement, the company is required to pay 90 lakh at the end of 8th year. So the agreement is saying that I need to make the payment at the end of 8th year. So I need to repay my loan here. Repay the loan here. How much I should pay? I should pay 90 lakh rupees. Calculate the additional amount to be paid on account of rescheduling and also the book value of the loan at the end of 8th year when the rescheduling agreement took place. So they are asking, I am taking a loan from a bank. I said I will pay interest at the end of each year for the next 10 years. At the end of 10th year, I will pay the principal amount. I made the payment for 3 years. I defaulted here. Where did I default? I have defaulted in the 4th year. So 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th. Okay. For 5 years, I need to pay the interest additionally. Okay. So it will come to, I will make the calculation here. 50 lakh is my principal amount. It will be getting compounded for 5 times. I told you why 5 times. I defaulted 4th, 5th, 6th. Bank came to me for rescheduling on 7th and they are asking me to pay the payment 1 year after the reschedule. So 8th. So 5 years ke liye I need to make the interest 1.12 power 5 and this is interest. Interest we have already calculated here. So it will come to calculation. I am not doing it here because the session is not intended for calculation. Calculation you can do it on your own. So if you multiply this, you are getting 88 lakh 11,708. So this is the amount I should have paid on the 8th year when the bank is asking me to make the payment, but they are asking me to pay for 90 lakh. Whatever the extra I am paying, difference between these two, 1,88,291 is the additional payment. You can say it's kind of an interest. It kind of a penalty. You're understanding? So this question could come for 2-3 marks. Entity A holds an option to purchase equity shares in a listed entity B for 100 rupees per share at the end of 90th day period. Evaluate the contract whether a financial asset or a financial liability. What if the entity A has written the option and the price of the share on the expiry date is 120? So this is your call and put option ka question. So it's like we are A, we are purchasing a share in B. We are not just purchasing, we are purchasing an agreement to purchase a share in B at the rate of 100 In simple words, you can say it is your exercise price, but on the expiry date the value is 120. Okay, so this is a market value. Now you have to tell whether it is a financial asset or a financial liability. Okay, so the conditions, one of the conditions which says that is, if you are having a contractual obligation to deliver cash or to exchange an equity or a financial instrument which is unfavorable to you. Okay, if it is unfavorable to you or potentially unfavorable to you, that will become your financial liability. If it is potentially favorable to you, it will become a financial asset. Sir, in simple words, I am A, I am purchasing or I am entering into a contract to purchase an asset or purchase a share in company B at 100 rupees. That is my exercise price. But in the current market, in the stock exchange, the share is quoting at 120. So can I exercise the option? Will I exercise the option? First of all, I will definitely exercise it. Reason being, why I exercise? If I exercise, I can purchase the share at 100 rupees from B. The same share I can sell it in the open market for 120. So that is potentially favorable to me. So when an agreement is potentially favorable to me as a purchaser of a call option, it will become a financial asset for me. And the party with whom I have entered the contract, for him it is a potentially unfavorable. So you can say for that person, if I exercise the option, he will have to lose 20 rupees because he has to purchase the share at 120 and sell it to me at 100. So potentially unfavorable to the other party, the writer of the call option. So for him it's a financial liability. For me it's a potentially favorable to me. So this is a financial asset for the purchaser or A Limited. A company has issued 6% mandatory redeemable preference shares with mandatory fixed dividends. Evaluate whether such preference shares are an equity instrument or a financial liability to the issuer entity. So just a glimpse. First of all, we need to say whether it is a financial instrument or not. First thing is, we need to say whether that is a financial instrument or not, and then it will become financial asset to one party, financial liability to the other party, or equity instrument to the other party. Put it simply, first of all, we have to evaluate whether a contract is a financial instrument. Once it is a financial instrument, for one party it will be a financial asset, the other party it can be a financial liability or it can be a equity instrument. Okay, in this case, there is a company A. These are their liabilities. They are issuing 6% mandatory redeemable preference shares. What do you mean by mandatory redeemable? When I am issuing, I am promising them that I will pay you after certain date. Okay, so this is a contractual cash flows. Is it a contractual cash flow? I am promising them that I will repay you at the end of 6th year. I will repay you at the end of 10th year. So this is a contractual obligation, and 6% interest. This is also a kind of a contractual cash flow for me. Every year I need to make the dividend payment to them. Then I have to issue to the equity shareholders. So then I can say there is a contractual obligation for dividend portion as well as principal portion. Okay, so when these conditions are satisfied, I will say it is my financial liability. Sir, I have not understood. Listen once again. I am issuing a debt. In that debt, I am clearly telling them that I will give you 6% interest, 6% dividend. So this is a contractual obligation on my part. Every year I need to keep paying them 6%, 6%, 6%. So it's a contractual obligation. And I'm also telling them that at the end of 10th year, I'll repay you the entire amount. So the principal amount also I'm promising them. This is a contractual obligation on my part. So when there is a contractual obligation to pay the cash, it will become a financial liability, or else it will become equity instrument. It will become equity instrument. If there is a contractual obligation to pay cash, it will become a financial liability, else it will become a equity instrument. So here in this case, what you can say, mandatorily. So when I'm saying mandatorily, so this is a compulsion on my part to redeem them. So it's a contractual obligation to pay cash. So it's becoming financial liability. A company issued non-redeemable preference shares with a dividend payment linked to equity shares. Evaluate whether such preference shares are an equity instrument or a financial liability to the issuer entity. Okay, I'll explain the question. We are company A. I am issuing preference shares. Take an example, 10 lakh. While issuing, I am telling him that I'll pay you dividend, but I'll not tell you how much dividend I'll pay. I'll pay you as much as I'm paying for equity, or I'll pay you when I'm paying for equity. So there is no contractual obligation on my part. I'm not telling them, okay, I'll pay you first 5% or I'll pay you first 8%. I'm not telling them, I'm not promising them anything. Rather, I'm saying that I'll pay you when I'm paying for equity. So if I'm not paying for equity, I can defer this payment. So when there is a potentially possibility for the issuer to defer the payment, there is no obligation. I can say, okay, I'm not paying for equity, I'll not pay for you also. So when I have that option, it is not a contractual obligation. I'll pay when I'm paying for equity. So when I'm going for liquidation, that time I'll pay you. So this is as good as your equity. So this is not a financial liability. So there are few questions, and these questions could be your examination questions. So please pay attention here. Is cash a financial asset or financial liability? The answer is financial asset, because in the definition itself they are saying whenever there's a cash, it's a financial asset. Cash equivalent, it's also you can see the answer here, but understand the interpretation also. So financial asset, bank balance, financial asset, deposit given. So you understand, for everything there is either a cash or it's a contractual right to receive the cash. There should be at least one aspect of it. Either I have a cash in my pocket, it's a financial asset, but I have a contract to receive the cash, that is also my financial asset. Okay, deposit given. So I'm giving a deposit to my employees. I'm a company, I'm giving deposit to my employees. So it's not a cash for me, but it's a contractual right to receive the cash. So it's a financial asset. Okay. So next, trade and trade receivables. So I'm selling goods on a credit basis. So I'll book them as my debtors. So it's a contractual right to receive the cash. Yes, they are not paying the cash now, but they'll pay after 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. So it's a contractual right to receive the cash. So it will become a financial asset. And bills receivable, same logic. Bills payable. So I bought some goods on a credit basis. I said that I'll make the payment after 30 days. So it is not a liability, but it's a contractual liability. Okay. So there is a contract. There is not necessarily in written, but it's a contract that I'll make the payment in future terms. So it's a contractual obligation to pay cash. Okay. So that is becoming my financial liability. Loans, including bank loans. So when I'm taking a loan from a bank, obviously there is a contractual obligation. I need to pay the EMI. I need to make the payment of interest. I need to make the payment of principal. So financial liability. Investment in equity. So even when I'm saying investment in equity, I'm purchasing equity shares of Reliance. Okay. So for me, it's a contractual right to receive cash tomorrow. When I sell the shares, I'll get the money, or maybe if I hold it, I'll get the dividend. So it's a contractual right to receive the cash. So it is becoming my financial asset. So from my side, it's a financial asset. For the other side, you have to see whether that is a financial liability or equity. For that, again, we have to go with what is their contractual obligations for them. Okay, so for them, it's the equity only. Yeah, investment in debentures is also financial asset. Same logic. I'm purchasing debentures of another company. What they said is they will be redeeming in some time. Till the time they will be making the payment of interest. So I am receiving a cash. So contractual right to receive the cash. The cash is interest and the redemption value. Okay, so like that you can see few things, but again we will discuss few more things. Prepaid expenditure. So why prepaid expenditure is not a financial instrument? This is the same example I said it in the morning also. This premises I am taking on a rent basis. I paid the rent for the next month. So there is a contractual right. But what is the contractual right? The contractual right to use the premises for one more month. But it is not a contractual right to receive the cash. So when I am paying to the landlord 1 month rent in advance, I cannot go to him and say that, sir, आप जो मैं पे किया था उसको मैं वापस कर दो. He will not give that money to me. Okay, so it's a contractual right, but the right is to use the land or the premises, but not to refund the money. Okay, but our definition says that there has to be a contractual right to receive the cash. So there is no contractual right to receive the cash in prepaid expenditure. For that reason, we will say it's not a financial instrument. And inventory also, I am a manufacturer or I am a trader. I have certain goods here. I am able to sell some goods. When I am selling, they are becoming a debtor. So the debtor is a contractual right to receive the money, but I am not able to sell few goods. They are lying in my godown as a stock, closing stock. Those stock, I will not sell it. If understand, I am not able to sell in the market. So where is the contractual right to receive the cash? It's a stock. Yes, if you sell tomorrow, you will receive the cash. But as of now, are you receiving any cash? Is there any contract? कोई ऐसा आपको बोल रहा क्या? No, I'll pay cash for this. There is no contractual right to receive the cash for my stock in trade. Yes, if I sell, I'll get the cash, or if I sell on a credit basis, the people will eventually be converted into cash. But for time being, as on now, on the balance sheet date, it is not a contractual right to receive the cash. So it's not a financial instrument. And PPE is also same thing. I have a big setup here. I have a land or I have machinery, everything. Yes, they are there. I'm using them, but nobody is telling me that they'll make the payment to me. There's no contractual right to receive the cash. Yes, when I sell, I'll get the cash. But for now there is no contractual right. So it's not a financial instrument. So like that you can you can keep checking for other things also. This one thing I want to throw a light on this. Leases. If it is a finance lease, like a long-term lease, for the one who is taking the lease, it's a financial asset. So I'm taking the premises. It's a finance lease for a long period of time. I'm making some changes. Okay, so it's exclusively for me. So like I'm substituting, I'm fulfilling all the conditions for a finance lease. So for me, it's a financial asset. For the other party, it's a financial liability. For operating lease, this is just like your regular expenditure. So don't take that into financial instrument topic. Okay. And we will have few more questions. The question says that, what do you mean by this trade day accounting and settlement day accounting? So this question now keeps coming in examination. So we will go through this once. Trade day is the date that an entity commits itself to purchase or sell an asset. So what do you mean by that? Say if I am following my trade day accounting, when I am entering into an agreement, I'll make an entry. When I am entering into an agreement, I'll make an entry. But if I'm going with a settlement day accounting, I will make an entry only when I'm receiving the goods. Okay, goods ka matlab like it can be anything. So trade day is kind of in advance. So I will record everything in advance. But in settlement date, you will wait for the delivery to come in. Okay, so that's the only difference. So I have a question here, and this could be your examination question. So please mark it as important. Let us say on 30th March 2015, an entity enters into an agreement to purchase a financial asset for 100 rupees, which is a fair value on that date. So today is the 30th March. I am entering into an agreement saying that I will purchase this asset. On that date, it is 100 rupees. So that is a fair market value on the date of the agreement. On the balance sheet date, one day after that, the fair value is 102. So when I entered into an agreement, it was 100. Now it is becoming 102. And on the settlement date, that is 2nd April, means after 2 days, the fair market value is becoming 103. So put it simply, there are 3 days. One is 30th March, another is 31st March. This is a closing of the balance sheet, and 2nd of April, this is a settlement date. So here it is a agreement date. On the agreement date, it is 100 rupees. That is the fair value. On the balance sheet date, it is becoming 102. On the settlement date, it is becoming 103. So now he is asking, pass the necessary general entries on the trade date and settlement date when the asset acquired is measured through amortization cost, fair value through P&L, fair value through OCI. So there are 3 possible cases, that like total 6. Okay, we need to account to this. This is a agreement date, this is a balance sheet date, this is a settlement date. Okay, so this is settlement date. So we will answer through amortization cost. If the entity is selecting this one, what is the situation? If the entity is selecting fair value through P&L, what is the situation? If the entity is going for the fair value through OCI, what is the situation? Okay, so assuming that, yeah, here it is 100, it is 102, it is 103. That is the fair values. So we will go with the first amortization method. Amortization, we have two possibilities. The company can either select trade day accounting or settlement day accounting. Entries are there in your book also. Try to understand the logic. So logic will help you. When it is a trade day accounting, I will write an entry when I am entering into a contract. I will repeat. If it is a trade day accounting, I will book in my books of accounts. I will write an entry in my books of accounts the day I am entering into an agreement. So when I am entering in an agreement, it is 100 rupees. So on that date only. So on 30th March only, I will record the entry. So I will write the entry like financial asset account debit 100, because on that date the fair value was 100. Don't say it's 102, it's on the balance sheet date. Okay. 2, it's a liability. I'm not making any payment. So payable 100. So this is a trade day accounting. I'll repeat. On trade day accounting, I'll record my entry the day I am entering into an agreement. Okay. So and then now it is 31st March. There is a change in the valuation. It was 100 rupees when I entered. Now it is becoming 102. Should I recognize 2 rupees profit or should I recognize any loss, if at all? No. The answer is no. Reason, I am not going with the fair value method. I am going with the amortization. So in amortization, you will completely ignore the fair valuation. Whenever there is an increase, you will not be bothered with that. So which means that I will not write an entry. Are you understanding? Whenever there is a change in the fair value, I will not record that in my amortization cost. In amortization, it is simply as if he will record only whatever he promised, that's it. He will not go with what is the fair valuation. So it will be no entry on 31st March. Again on 2nd April, when the settlement is happening, the fair value is 103. So will he record the entry for 103? Answer is no, because he is not concerned about your fair valuation. Whether that is an increase or decrease, he is not concerned only in amortization. So he will continue to record the entry for 100 only. Payable account debit 100 to cash or bank, you can say 100. So what are we doing? Whatever is our liability earlier, that we nullified, we made the payment, debit the receiver, you can say credit what goes out. It's all like foundation methods, techniques only, but understand the context of it. In amortization cost, I will record my entry only when I committed, only when I am receiving the delivery. बीच में जो भी fair valuation को change आ रहा, I will be completely ignoring that. Okay, so that is your trade day accounting for amortization, and we will go for the settlement day accounting. So when I am going with the settlement, I will not be writing any entry on 30th March. Why, sir? Because I am kind of a person, I will write an entry only when I am receiving the goods, when I am receiving the stock. So when I am entering into an agreement, I will not write an entry for my settlement accounting. So I will not write an entry here. Because I am selecting amortization cost, though there is a change and increase of 2 rupees, I will not record the 2 rupees also. Which means when I am entering into an agreement, I will not write an entry because I am selecting the settlement date accounting. When there is a change on the balance sheet, even that also I will not record it because I am not going for the fair valuation. So I will write an entry at the end directly, that is financial asset account debit, what comes in debit, you can say, to cash 100. I hope you understand. You are understanding. We are taking more time, though I am saying it's only for examination. My point is you should not miss these entries in examination. So we are done with the amortization. We'll go with the fair valuation. Now understand, when I am going with the fair valuation through P&L, which means that at every stage I will do the fair valuation and I will recognize it, and the recognition of gain or loss, I will route it through P&L. If I am routing it through OCI, I will use the word OCI. If I am using it to P&L, I will use the wording P&L. Everything is same. The P&L ka matlab, it is going into your main income, main section of the P&L. If it is going to OCI, it will be shown in your balance sheet. Okay, that's the only difference. Now, yeah, we'll continue with again trade day accounting and settlement day accounting. Use the same logic what we used on 30th March. We are committing. Do we write an entry? Yes, because we are going for the trade day accounting. So financial asset 100 to payable 100. Okay, so there is no issue with that. And on 31st March, there is a change of 2 rupees in your valuation. Should you recognize it? Yes, of course, because you are going for the fair valuation, 2 rupees. How do you do that? That only the element which is increased, for that you need to write the entry, which means your financial asset is increased by 2 rupees. It's already in the debit balance. You increase one more time, so you debit one more time. So financial asset account debit 2 rupees. 2. Do you take into P&L? Because we are going to fair value through P&L, we will take this 2 rupees into P&L. And on the 2nd of April, again there is a fair valuation. There is an increase of 1 rupee. So again you will write financial asset account debit 1 rupee to P&L 1 rupee. So what are we doing? At each stage we are fair valuing it, and whenever there is an increase, to that extent we are routing it to P&L because we are adopting fair value through P&L method. And this is one part, and we are taking the delivery also on the 2nd April. So when you are taking the delivery, cash should go out. Okay, so cash should go out. So cash account credit 100 and payables will be debited 100. Sir, why not 103? Though the fair valuation is 103, but you promised or you entered into an agreement to pay 100 only, right? So you will make the payment of only 100. In simple words, the payable will be nullified. Okay, so which means that our financial asset is been shown in the books of accounts at 103, 100 is going out, 3 rupees is coming to your P&L. Okay, so that is your trade day accounting. We will do for settlement accounting, settlement day accounting also. Same way, 30th March. So do you write an entry? No. Why, sir? Why are you not writing? Because I'm not bothered about what agreement you entered. I will not write an entry when you enter into an agreement. I'll write only when it is settled. Okay, so I'll not write an entry when you are entering into an agreement. Sir, but on 31st March, there is a change in the fair valuation. Should you recognize that? Yes. Why? Because we are going with the fair valuation through P&L. You are understanding? So for that reason, we will write. Can we write financial asset here? because there is no ledger. You're not yet opened that ledger only. So you should not write the financial asset there. You should write there will be some name, fair value change to PL2. Yes. Okay, I'll explain the logic. In this portion, what we have done is we have debited financial asset only because it was already created earlier. But now you have not even opened that ledger only. There is no ledger called financial asset. You didn't write the entry when you entered into an agreement. You are writing only when there is a change in the valuation, right? So you cannot write financial asset account 2 rupees to P&L. Rather you say fair value change account to 2 rupees. Anyway, that will again go to the main account only. But for time being, because the settlement has not been done, so you will record it through fair value change account 2 rupees to P&L 2 rupees. And then on the 2nd of April, there is again change of 1 rupee. So fair value change 1 to P&L 1. This is also very clear, same entry, because there is no financial asset, so we will not write financial asset. We will only route it through fair value change account. Again we are taking the delivery. So when you are taking the delivery, financial asset is coming. Since you are not recognized it earlier, you have to recognize all at once. So 103 the financial asset. Why 103? Why not 100? Because you didn't open financial asset account only, but when you are taking the delivery, the fair valuation of the financial asset is 103. So it is very prudent to recognize it at 103. 2. Payable. How much money you will pay? Just because the fair valuation is 103, you will not pay 103. You will only pay 100 because you committed only 100 rupees. Then the 3, whatever you recognize, like here, fair value change 2 rupees, fair value change 1 rupee. That account you will reverse it now. Fair value change 3. Okay. So any confusion? I don't know your response here. Yeah. So this is your fair value through P&L, and we will go with the fair value through OCI. Here also we apply the same logic. There is no change of logic. Instead of using P&L, we will only use OCI. Okay. So trade day accounting and settlement day accounting. So why on 30th March trade day accounting, would you recognize it? Yes, we will recognize it because trade day is like you'll write the entry the moment you are entering into an agreement. So financial asset account debit 100 to payable 100. This is fine. 31st March there is a change. There is a change of only 1 rupee. So 1 rupee you have to recognize. Financial asset, I told you the reason, because the financial asset ledger has already been opened, so you can debit that. Financial asset account debit 1 rupee. 2. Instead of calling P&L, you will be calling OCI. That's the only difference. Okay. Instead of going directly into your mouth of P&L, like main revenue, you are taking it into your balance sheet OCI. Okay. So 1 rupee, 2 rupees change. And then on the 2nd of April, again there is a fair valuation of 1 rupee. There is an increase of 1 rupee because of fair valuation. So again fair value account debit 1 rupee to OCI 1 rupee. Done. And now the settlement has to take place. So when you are making the settlement, payable account debit 100 to cash 100. Sir, why only 100? Why not 103? Because you committed for 100, you will only make 100. Why would you make 103? Okay, so that is your trade day. Settlement, you will not write an entry here as a case. So you will not write an entry. And coming to 31st March, there is a fair valuation. Will you do the fair valuation? Yes, of course, because he is opting for fair valuation through OCI. So you will recognize the 2 rupees ka effect. So you will not write financial asset account. Reason that asset is not opened at all. So you will call it fair value change. Fair value change account debit 2 rupees and OCI 2 rupees. Here also 2nd April there is a change of 1 rupee. So fair value change account debit 1 to OCI 1. Right? I hope it's like a regular stuff once you're coming to this stage. and from here you make the actual entry like settlement entry, financial asset, $103 is coming to you. Cash you will make 100 and fair value 3. Okay, so that's how you can write the entry. It's like a elaborated explanation I have given, hoping so that you understood it, so that because in examination there is a possibility that this question comes. A company invests in equity shares of another entity on 15th March for 10,000. Transaction cost is 20,000 rupees, not included. Transaction cost is 2,200, not included in 10,000. Fair value on the balance sheet date is 31st March 2015 is 12,000. Past necessary entries. He is opting for fair value through P&L, which means that on every incident and every balance sheet date, he will do the fair valuation. Okay, so now he is opting for fair valuation through P&L. While he is purchasing, the value was 10,000. On the balance sheet date, the value is 12,000. So how do you record it? Do you add this 200 rupees whatever if you paid it to your original cost of investment? The answer is no. We will not write that because we are adopting for fair value through P&L. Entry will be investment account debit 10,000, transaction cost 200, to bank 10,200. Very clear. Transaction cost is not included because we are adopting fair value through P&L. And then on the balance sheet date, that is 31st March 2015, we are doing the fair valuation. On the date, the value is coming to 12,000. The value is coming to 12,000. So there is a change of 2,000 rupees. So 2,000 rupees you have to recognize as an increase. Already it is in a debit balance. So investment account debit 2,000. There is a fair value change of 2,000 rupees. So fair value gain 2,000. Sir, what are we doing? We are doing fair value through P&L. So I could have simply written P&L. The answer would have been same. But to have the better clarity of how the entries are being moved to the P&L, we will write first to fair value through fair value gain account, and from fair value gain account we will transfer to P&L. Fair value gain account to P&L 2,000. Put it simply, when we purchased it for 2,000. This 200 rupees I don't want to include it in my cost of investment. So what I will do is I will transfer this also into my P&L, which means P&L account debit 200. Yeah, 200 to transaction cost 200. Put it simply again, when you are going for the fair value through P&L, you will not recognize that transaction cost into the main investment, that you will route it to your P&L, and whenever there is a change in the investment, you will again that also you will take it into P&L. But the only point is you take it through another ledger called fair value gain, from fair value gain to P&L. A company invested in equity shares of another entity on 15th March for 10,000. So he is investing for 10,000 on 15th March. Transaction cost is 200. So we are incurring 200 rupees here, not included in the above. Fair value on the balance sheet date. So on the balance sheet date 31st March, it is coming to 12,000, just like the previous question. Pass the necessary general entries. What is the difference? Earlier it was fair value through P&L, but here it is fair value through OCI. So when it is a fair value through OCI, you will add the transaction cost into your investment. Okay, so investment, you will not say I purchased it for 10,000, rather you will say I purchased it for 10,200 and the bank amount, like the amount which is going out is 10,200. okay, so should you recognize this 200 into your P&L? No, because you have capitalized it. Okay, you have taken into your balance sheet only, right? So you don't have to again transfer it to your P&L, but again on the balance sheet date there is a fair value change. So from 10,200 it is becoming 12,000, so there is an increase of 1,800, so you have to recognize that increase. So investment investment account debit 1,800 to fair value gain. Is there any change with the last answer? Absolutely no, everything same we have done for the fair value through P&L also. And from fair value gain to, you will transfer it to not P&L, because we are not doing fair value through P&L, we are doing fair value through OCI. So we will write OCI 1,800. okay, from here again they will transfer it to another ledger, OCI to reserves 1,800. okay, so fair value reserve. Understanding? So that is the treatment difference between P&L and difference between OCI. If you are transferring it to OCI, better you transfer it to separate reserve. That's okay, from OCI to a reserve. A company lends 100 lakhs to another company at 12% per annum interest on this date. It incurs 40,000 rupees incremental cost for documentation. Loan tenure is 5 years with the interest charged annually. okay, so now the company is saying financial asset accounted as amortized cost. So when I say amortized cost, I just said it now. If it is a fair value accounting you are doing, so there is a chance that you can apply, you can use fair value through P&L or fair value through OCI. okay, other option is you can go for the amortization cost, which means that you will recognize the expenditure, or you recognize the revenue, or you recognize the cost, everything as and when it is incurred. okay, so you will not do any fair valuation on a subsequent dates. You will not do that. okay, so if you don't want to do, then only you are going for the amortization cost, to be honest. okay, so now here what happened is, we are a banking company, we are lending 100 lakh to another company. So first we shall have to write the entry. 1st April 2015, loan. Why we are debiting loan? Loan is a financial asset. I told you, no, contractual, it's a right to receive cash tomorrow. I am giving a loan, so I am entering into a contract. It's a contractual right to receive cash. So it's an asset for me. 100 to bank 100. So while I am giving that loan, I am incurring processing fees of 40,000 rupees. 40,000. So that is also going out. So for processing fees, I will write loan processing fees 40K to bank, again credit 40K. No issues here. okay, but now we have to understand, because we are doing amortization cost, we will transfer this expenditure to the loan account only. okay, so which means again debit loan account 40K to loan processing fee 40K. In simple words, loan processing fees we are not taking, we are putting it on the customer only. So we are increasing his loan liability. I am a bank, I am giving a loan, I am giving 100 lakh loans, for that I am incurring 40,000. So it is not out of my pocket, it is his pocket only. okay, so I will increase his loan liability. Just like that, we are going for a bank for a loan. So when I am taking 1 lakh loan and they say 2,000 rupees of processing fees, so what they do, they will deduct that amount only, right? I mean, like, which means either they can deduct from the amount that they are giving it to me, or they can add it to the loan liability. okay, so that's what they are doing. That's what they are doing. An entity is about to purchase a portfolio of fixed rate assets that will be financed by a fixed rate debentures. Both the financial assets and financial liabilities are subjected to the same interest rate risk that give rise to opposite changes in the fair value that tends to offset with each other. So which means that we are a company, we are a company, we have certain assets, we have liabilities. I'm writing in the old style. We are trying to build up a portfolio, means we are trying to invest somewhere, and the portfolio involves fixed rate instruments, means I want to purchase some debentures, I want to purchase some bonds. Okay, to have this portfolio, I am being financed by a debenture. So what are they doing? If I am a company, I am issuing my debentures at certain percentage, I am receiving the money. So with the same money, I am building a portfolio, and I am also investing in the same market from where I have issued this. Okay, if it is in the Indian market, this is also in the Indian market also. So everything is offsetting. So what accounting I should go for? Okay, so you can go for OCI because both are having from the same market. C Limited has lent sum of 10 lakh rupees at 18% per annum for 10 years. The loan had a fair value of 12,23,960 at the effective interest rate of 13%. So I am a company. I am lending of 10 lakh rupees of loan to a person, and I am charging 18% interest rate. Okay, so I am giving 10 lakh rupees of loan at the rate of 18%. The loan had a fair value of, so this loan is having a fair value of 12,23,960 and at the effective interest rate of 13%. So what are you trying to say? What I am trying to say is, I am issuing a loan to the customers at 18%. That is like a too huge interest rate, wherein the effective rate is 13% only. That means in the market the prevailing rate is only 13%. So I am charging more. Because I am charging more, the value of the loan I am giving, the fair value of the loan that I am giving will be high. So that is the reason why the fair value is 12,23,960. 12,23,960. To mitigate the prepayment risk, but at the same time retaining control over the loan, C Limited transferred its right to receive the principal amount of loan on its maturity with the interest after retaining rights over 10% of principal and 4% interest that carries fair value of 29,000 and 1,84,620 respectively. So what I am trying to do is, because I am charging more from the customer, there is always a risk that the customer will arrange the money somehow and repay me in early. Okay, that is called a prepayment risk. I'm in a risk. See, I'm enjoying 18% at the moment, but I cannot feel that, I cannot be so satisfied that the customer will continue to pay me at 18% because the interest rate is too high. There is a possibility that he will arrange the money from his other sources and he will prepay the loan to me. So to avoid that, I want to mitigate the risk of that prepayment by transferring this entire loan to a third party. Okay, so that I am out of the danger of prepayment. Even if there is a prepayment, that person will take the effect. I will not take it. But at the same time, I want to have the control over the asset. So what I am doing, I am transferring 90% of my right over the loan to the other party. I mean, like I am retaining 10% control of the loan and 90% I am transferring it to a factor. The consideration for the transaction was 9,90,000. So when I am transferring it to my factor, the factor is giving me 9,90,000 rupees. The interest component retained includes 2% fee towards the collection of principal and interest that has a fair value of 65,160. Okay, so I am retaining two parts. One part is 10% over the principal, 2% over the interest. Remaining all I am transferring it to the other party. Okay, so now they have given the fair value of interest portion, they have given the fair value of the principal portion also. Default, if any, are deductible to maximum extent of the company's claim on principal portion. You are required to show the journal entries to record the derecognition of the loan. So derecognition का मतलब when I issued the loan, I have recognized a liability, financial asset. When I am transferring it to the third party, I am de-recognizing my liability. So what is the entry, to what extent you should de-recognize from your books of accounts is a question here. So because I cannot shuffle here and there, I'm looking at the question from the other source. Please open your study material for this question. I will be doing separately. Fair value of the loan that's given in the question is 12,23,960. Numbers are there in your study material. I'm not here to tell the numbers. The concept of that is what I'm trying here. So the fair value of the loan in my books of accounts is 12,23,960. When I'm transferring it, whatever I'm retaining, I will deduct it, so that I'll come to know what is I'm transferring to the other party. I'll repeat. The fair value of the entire setup is like 12,23,960, of which I'm retaining this pencil, of which I'm retaining some other aspect, and of which I'm retaining this mic. Rest time all I'm transferring. So I want to know what is the fair value of the thing that I'm transferring. For that, I will deduct from the total fair value whatever I'm retaining with me. Okay, don't confuse. This is the total fair valuation of all setup. I want to retain few things, I want to transfer few things. So if I want to know what is the fair value of the things that I'm transferring to the other party, what I will do is I'll calculate the fair value of the entire setup. Then I keep deducting the ones which I'm retaining, so that I come to know what is I'm transferring it to the other party. So which means that I will see what I'm retaining. I'm retaining principal portion of 10%. Given in the question 29,000, they call it principal strip, and I'm retaining interest strip. The fair valuation is 1,19,460, and again I'm retaining service portion. I'm just like the processing element, service strip, that is 65,160. Sir, how did you get this 1,19,460? If anybody is getting that doubt, in the question you see C Limited transferred its right to receive the principal amount of the loan on its maturity with interest after retaining rights over 10% of principal and 4% of interest, that carries a fair value of 29,000 and 1,84,620 respectively. Okay, so the interest portion is 1,84,620, which includes the service portion as well. So I am deducting this 65,160 given in the question. This is your service portion, so that I will get my interest portion of the remaining, like balancing figure 1,84,620 minus 65,160. So I am getting 1,19,460. Okay, so this is the interest strip. So once I deduct all these things, I have a calculation, so I am not wasting that time. 10,10,340 is the securitization component. Sir, what are you talking? Securitization component का मतलब the fair value of the thing and giving it to the factor. Okay, so that is a securitization function. Now we need to find out what is the principal effect of this. Okay, which means that your original principal amount is 10 lakh, but you are transferring to factor at 10 lakh. Okay, no, small correction. Original principal amount is 10 lakh and the fair valuation on the date is on date of transfer is 12,23,960. Okay, so what is the proportionate I am transferring? That I need to segregate between principal strip, interest strip, service strip. Okay, so I will do it, just focus on the calculation part only. What I mean by this is, this 10 lakh portion I will bifurcate into 4 parts. One is the one I am giving to the third party, securitization component. One is a principal which I am retaining with myself, principal strip, and one the interest strip I am retaining with myself, and the processing fees strip that I am charging for the securitization. Okay, so there are 4 elements. So I need to segregate the entire amount to my principal amount. Okay, what I mean by that is, how much I am giving it to securitization? 10,10,340 is what I am giving. So this is 10 lakh is the principal amount out of 12,23,960. So what is the logic here? I am transferring 10,10,340 fair value of the component to the third party, right? So that is what portion? It is this portion. Okay, so 10 lakh out of 12,23,960, which means that to what extent the fair valuation is different from your principal amount. Okay, same way principal amount, here you can see the calculation, 29,000 multiplied by same thing 10 lakh divided by 12 lakh 23,960. Same logic, the principal portion that I am retaining, that with respect to the fair valuation of its original value. Interest portion is 1,19,460 multiplied by 10 lakh divided by 12,23,960. Again you go with the service strip for fees 65,160. That is also same logic. Every time you are using the same logic. Okay, so I'm not repeating that. Okay, so what is your fair value with respect to its original principal? So that we are segregating for all 4 portions. One, what I am retaining, what I am transferring. In that retaining also there is a principal portion, interest portion, service portion. Okay, so if you do all the calculation, which I am not doing it now, or maybe we should do it. Okay, I'll write it from here. So it is becoming 8,25,468. The principal portion is coming to 23,694, and this is coming interest portion 97,601, and the fees portion it is coming to 53,237. So what are we find out? We are finding out the total. If you make it, it will become 10 lakh, which means our total whatever we are de-recognizing, we are calculating what portion is going to that person, what portion is staying with me, and out of which what portion is my interest, what portion is my principal, what portion is my service. Okay, so this is 10 lakh. So while writing an entry, now the entry part will come into picture. I hope you understood the question. That much is sufficient. We should not spend more time on this. Okay, so now we will write an entry here. While we are transferring our component to the third party, securitization is making the payment to us. So bank is giving 9,90,000, for which we are giving certain things to him. So what we are giving? We are giving a loan which is coming up to 8,25,468. So how did you get this number? For 8,25,000, this one. Okay, so this is like a principal book value we are trying to find out. Whatever they have given is here. Whatever they have given is all at fair value. बट फेयर वैल्यू से क्या फर्क पड़ता है? इन आवर बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स इट इज a 10 lakh, right? Out of the 10 lakh, which portion is going out? This portion is going out. That is the reason why we have calculated the proportionate portion, because we wanted to de-recognize from our books of accounts. So we will write 8,25,465. That is the principal portion which is going out, which means the remaining amount is still with us only. The remaining amount you can say it's a profit and loss. Calculation to already here there, 1,64,532. So what do you mean by P&L credited? Because we are giving away a loan to the extent of 8,25,468. In turn, we are receiving 9,90,000. So there itself we are making a profit that you can take into your P&L. So credit the P&L. And next, whatever you have calculated, like interest, service, and all, that you can transfer it to your loan account. Interest portion, service portion. I'm not writing here. It's there in the book. You just take the values and you transfer it to loan account. Okay, that is also your de-recognizing. So why are you de-recognizing? When I'm transferring certain portion of my principal, my loan to that person, not just the principal amount is going out, the interest on that is also going out to that extent. Service portion is also going out. Interest portion is also going out. So everything that you de-recognize from your books of accounts. Okay, so that is the answer for that, and we'll solve few more questions. Illustration 13. Entity XYZ enters into a fixed price forward contract to purchase 10 lakh kilograms of copper in accordance with the its expected usage requirements. Okay, so I am entering into a forward contract to purchase 10 lakh kilograms of copper in future. So if I have an intention of not taking the delivery, which is like it involves lesser investment and the value will change according to the underlying asset, and I have no intention of taking the delivery. If these three conditions are satisfied, you can say it's a derivative contract. Or if I have an intention of taking the delivery, because I'm in the manufacturing sector and I need this copper for my manufacturing purpose, I'm entering into a forward contract to take the delivery. I have a past history of doing that. Then I will not say it's a derivative. I would rather say it's a contract. Okay, it's an executory contract, which is that we are going to execute in the future. And if the contract becomes onerous, you will book under Ind AS 37. Okay. So there are other questions. Illustration 14. On 1st April 2015, Delta issued 30 lakh 6% convertible debentures of face value of 100 per debenture at par. The debentures are redeemable at premium of 10% on 31st March 2019, or these may be converted into ordinary shares at the option of the holder. The interest rate for the equivalent debentures without conversion rights would have been 10%, being the compound financial instrument. Like whenever an instrument contains a little part for debt, like financial liability, and little part for your equity, then we call it as a compound instrument. Okay, this is a classical example of that. You are required to separate equity and debt portion. So this is just like your bond valuation. What we will do is first we will calculate the financial liability portion, and the remaining will become your equity. If I am issuing it for 30 lakh, so this is the total issue price or the issue amount. इसमें से I will only deduct the financial liability portion, the remaining will become my equity. What do you mean by that? So we are promising to pay him 30 lakh at the end of कौन सा year? 4 years के बाद में, like we are issuing in 2015 and we are redeeming in 31st March 2019, right? 4 years के बाद में. So and that is also at a premium, so 1.1, and we need to find out what is the PV factor after the 4th year at 10%. Sir, why are you taking 10%? Why not 6%? 6% is what I am promising him, but the market price is 10%. Understand? If I am the entity, the prevailing market rate is 10%. In the existing market, the interest rate which is prevalent is 10%, but I am issuing a bond at 6%. So there is definitely a change in the fair valuation, no? So what I have to do is I have to convert all my future payments into the present value at the existing market rate. Okay, so I will be doing at 10%. Just you can do that. I'm not doing here. So it is becoming 0.680. It will come to 22,44,000. What I have done, whatever the amount I'm going to pay him at the end of 4th year, including premium, I'm discounting that at the existing market rate as of now 0th year. So I'm getting 22,44,000. This is a principal portion. This is a principal portion. Again I have interest portion also, because for the next 4 years I continue to make the payment of interest, right? So I will pay 30 lakh multiplied by 6%. Sir, why are you considering 6%? If just now you said 10%, 10% is to discount. But while making the interest, I will make the payment only what is I promised, right? I promised only 6%. So I'll take only 6%. So 6% multiplied by how many years you will pay? You will pay for 4 years, same amount. So you can do that present value factor, right? So for 4 years you are getting this as 3.17, and you multiply that, you are getting 5,70,600. Add it, you are getting 28,14,600. This is the total financial liability portion. But while I'm issuing debentures at 30 lakh, the remaining will amount go to your equity, 1,85,400. Are you understanding? Out of the total proceeds I'm receiving from a debt, I will convert all my future liabilities with the existing market to the present terms. The remaining will all become my equity portion. So this is a classical example of your compound financial instrument. So there is one company who is just buying back their own equity shares. So whenever you are buying back and equity, we will not do any fair valuation. Remember, it's a residual interest, right? We can do fair valuation for all our assets. We can do fair valuation for our liabilities, but we will not do fair valuation for our equity. So whenever you are redeeming or whenever you are buying back your own equity, the entry is very simple, like foundation mein, whatever you have read, studied, like CPT may just reverse it. Okay, so cancel the equity account debit to cash is going out or bank is going out, we can credit that. So there is no logic in that. Entity B places its privately held ordinary shares that are classified as equity with a stock exchange and simultaneously raises new capital by issuing new equity ordinary shares on the stock exchange. Transaction costs are incurred in respect of both the transaction. So I am an entity, I have already issued the capital. Now I want to issue new capital and I want to go to the stock exchange. So what are you trying to say? I have an existing equity of 1 lakh equity shares at 10 rupees, so it is becoming 10 lakh. I want to go for new equity, I want to issue fresh equity, 5 lakh equity shares multiplied by 10, so it is becoming 50 lakh. So all these shares I want to get it listed in a recognized stock exchange. For that I am incurring some 50,000 rupees as a transaction cost. So he is asking what is the treatment of this 50,000 rupees. Okay, for the equity I am issuing for the first time, for this I can add it to the original cost of the equity, but the equity which are already existing in my balance sheet, to that extent I have to take it to my P&L. Okay, I'll repeat, I'm incurring a transaction cost which is combinedly for my existing equity and new equity. Okay, so the existing equity ka transaction cost will be going into P&L, the new equity ka transaction cost will be going into my balance sheet, that will be added to my new equity. An entity issues a non-redeemable callable subordinate bond with a fixed 6% coupon. The coupon can be deferred in perpetuity at the issuer's option. The issuer has a history of paying the coupon each year, and the current bond price is predicted on the holder's expectation that the coupon will continue to be paid in each year. In addition, the stated policy of the issuer is that the coupon will be paid each year, which has been publicly communicated. Evaluate. So I am issuing a perpetual or non-redeemable callable subordinate bond with a fixed interest rate of 6%. So what is this? See, I am telling them that I am issuing a bond of 6%. Do I pay them? Normally I do pay, but there is no contractual obligation. I already communicated to the public that okay, every year I will be paying the 6%. I didn't promise, but it is known to the public. Okay, constructive obligation ban gaya. But even though it's a constructive obligation, the standard says that unless there is a contractual obligation to pay cash, either dividend or the repayment, you cannot convert that as, you cannot call that as a financial liability. That will become your equity instrument. Even though that you have a past history of declaring dividend or issuing the interest, even though your bond valuation is based upon whether you are making the payment or not, even though whatever the even though, when there is no contractual obligation, it will not become your financial liability, it will become your equity instrument. And for zero coupon bond also, there is a contractual obligation to redeem at the end of its useful life. I am issuing a bond at 70,000, I will redeem it at 1 lakh. This is the deep discounted bond. The 30,000, whatever the difference, is the interest portion. But I am not promising anything. I am not promising anything for the interest portion, but I am promising for the redemption portion, right? So this is your financial liability. Company X owes Company Y 20 million at the end of 31st March. As part of another contract, Company Y owes Contract X 15 million at 31st March. Company X has a legal right to offset the asset and liabilities, but historically Company X has settled 1 month after Y's settlement. So what are they fighting for? There is the entity X, there is entity Y. So X owes to Y for 20 million, Y owes to X for 15 million. So now I can say that if I'm X, I have to pay you 20 million, you have to pay me 15 million. Okay, so can I offset this? Can I directly show it as a 5 lakh liability? The answer is no. You can do that only when you have a legal right to offset, and you have a past history of doing that, then you can offset. Here the past history is that we will pay them 1 month after the Y is paying to us, right? So we cannot offset this. Okay, so 18, 19, 20, 24 we will do in the next session. And if you like the session, if you want the session to be in the same way, please let me know in the comment section. We can make the 4 chapters, I mean like 4 sums in the next session. Okay, so I would like to know how you like the video. Okay, thanks for watching, have a nice day.